Armed with only your wits about the situation, a variety of weapons, and your possessed sword, you breach areas of your world headfirst to rid the land of the demons who have corrupted it. In Kingdom of the Dead, you play as an agent sent out on a variety of missions to clean up the mess that has been caused by the undead. From 8 available locations to play on, each with its own interesting layout, terrain, and music, your primary goal is to survive and kill all opposition that stands before you. You'll have at your disposal 7 weapons, most of which have a primary and secondary fire mode, allowing for flexible and fast gameplay. This game, at its core, feels heavily inspired by the original Doom series. The movement is extremely fast and tight, the core of the gameplay philosophy being to never stop moving, as enemies can very easily swarm and overwhelm you with their physical and projectile attacks if you aren't careful. There's also a healthy variety of enemies as well, from generic undead who attack you with melee weapons to wizards firing energy blasts at you. And each level has its own boss, all themed around animals, making them all feel really interesting and different, while giving them similar goals and desires: to rid the world of the player character so they can rule all their little sections of the world as they will. Of course, the player is us, and we're not going to let that slide. Combat feels very tight as well. Headshots are the name of the game, well, for most enemies at least, and it's very satisfying to lay waste to enemies one after another with your choice of old Western-style guns. Since most guns don't have reloads, but instead have chambering or cocking animations, once you figure out the flow of combat with cycling between weapons to cancel out those animations, the game really feels like it opens up. And I think that's what I enjoyed most about this game, is the pace and flow of combat. At its core, this game just feels good to play. It feels good to land killing blows on enemies and keep pushing forward. Being aggressive and taking the fight to them feels good. And combine that with the game's soundtrack, you'll find yourself lost in the game, moving your head to the beat of the music and killing enemies one after another. You get that flow that games like Doom really knock out of the park. And speaking of OST, the game's music is really good. This dark and grungy soundtrack that wants to just do nothing but get in your head as you kill everything in front of you, except for the hostages that you're supposed to save, but hey, it does happen sometimes. Now, of course, the game's not perfect and it has its own flaws. The terrain can sometimes get you caught up while you're slaying hordes of the undead, so they'll kind of overwhelm you, which sucks. And the one thing that stood out to me the most was this one section in the later levels that was kind of rough. It was the only section of the game where I died like a lot more than once, and I think it's a byproduct of how the game handles hitboxes with enemies with something in front of them. You have to shoot the enemies not where you think you would in order to kill them, while they have like a weapon that knocks a whole heart off when you get hit. So it kind of sucks, and I can only imagine the damage on harder difficulties. And while most of the soundtrack is excellent, there are a couple songs that are a little grating on your ears. Even with the volume down, it's a lot of noise that can sometimes feel a little overwhelming, but it's like 1, maybe 2 tracks out of the whole OST, so it's really not that bad, but it's just something to keep in mind. Overall, Kingdom of the Dead came out of nowhere for me. I just happened to spot it one day while browsing Steam, and it's really fun. There's a reason to play the game at least twice. Once for just, your first standard playthrough, and then again on the hardest difficulty trying to collect everything in each level. And the hardest difficulty is definitely living up to that title. I tried it really briefly just to see what it was like, and it's just way more enemies, you don't have as much ammo, you take way more damage. Enemies that you wouldn't see later in the game show up much earlier, so it's a real challenge. Again, another thing that feels like Doom is the difficulty spike, and it's a good thing because it's going to really challenge you, and it's going to be a definitely rewarding experience. I would definitely recommend this game if anyone has some time to kill and just wants to vibe to a really fast Twitch FPS with some good music and a really interesting art design. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and I hope to see you in future ones.